Well, all right, folks, we are here today at 8 ways to unlock customer retention even in a recession. Are we in a recession? Are we headed for a recession? I have no earthly idea. I am not an economist, and neither is my wonderful guest, Bryan Rutberg. We are here not to tell you whether we are in or going toward a recession. We're simply acknowledging the reality that many of you are concerned about a recession. I am a little concerned about a recession. A recession is an absolute, let's call it this, it's an absolute possibility. It is absolutely possible that sooner or later, it's almost certain we're going to end up in a recession. So we're here to talk about 8 ways to unlock customer retention, even in a recession. I'm going to have 4 thoughts for you. Bryan Rutberg is going to have 4 thoughts for you. Before we get into our thoughts, Bryan, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Aaron. I'm glad to be here. I am Bryan Rutberg. I am the owner of both 3C Communications Training and Bryan Rutberg Speaking. And the 2 things I've been good at throughout my career are building great relationships and being a clear business communicator. And those 2 things, of course, go hand in hand. My passion comes out of helping organizations get the most out of every customer relationship they can. And whether you're in a recession or not in a recession, the number one vehicle you've got for taking more of your top line down to your bottom line is working with your existing customers. So let's unlock customer retention, and everything else will follow from that. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, you bet, Bryan. So, okay, speaking of unlocking customer retention, I mentioned already, you've got 4 thoughts. I've got 4 thoughts. Bryan, what is your first suggestion for the good people at home about how they can unlock customer retention even in a recession? And I'm going to imagine, and you can correct me if this is not true. I'm going to imagine that these are things that people can do to retain their customers even in boom times.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, there's nothing magical about a recession. In fact, probably quite the opposite. So the 4 things I've got, and I'm betting the 4 things you've got, are going to be good strategies for any time. But the harder it is to close new business, the more important it is to make the most out of every customer relationship you've got. I like to talk about customer activation. And one key way to do that is by creating community among your customers. Your customers, unless they're direct competitors, have a lot in common and aren't going to be shy about sharing key ways that they are using solutions from your organization or engaging with your organization. I think of the work I did way back when with a grain growers cooperative who were farmers committed to agricultural practices that regenerated land and did not use harmful things. And they formed a cooperative in order to sell more of the flour that was created from their grain. As they moved from mostly selling 50-pound bags of flour to commercial organizations to putting 5-pound bags of flour on the shelves, the strategy we came up with was to help them build community among home bakers who were high-end bakers, took great pride in what they did. And we encouraged the community to start posting recipes, pictures of their baking sessions, pictures of their finished products, stories about their process to create the perfect pie, cake, pizza crust, whatever, on Instagram. And by creating that community and getting our client out of the middle of it, we knew that these folks were increasing their connection to the brand. So tip number 1, create community among your customers, and they will take it from there to help you build your brand and stick around to see what you're going to do next.
I love this idea. So the community that you're building of your customers, I'm imagining you're talking about having community between customers where they are relating back and forth about the things that matter to them. And in particular, I imagine also the ways in which you are supporting each of them.
Precisely. For a period of time, I served as the interim chief marketing officer for a client in the financial services for startups and scale ups. And one of the ways we built community, putting ourselves at the center, at first at least, was to bring together our clients in different major cities that had lots of startup activity. And all of a sudden, entrepreneurs who owned businesses, who were working with us as their financial providers, were starting to trade notes about where they were getting their money, what kinds of problems they were solving, which banks they were having success working with, what other service providers they were finding useful. And by building community among CEOs and other founders of startups and scale ups, early growth financial services won by being in the middle of it and buying the first round of drinks whenever we would do meetups at local bars, or providing experts to speak on panels at other local events we would do.
Well, I think it's a little amusing, Bryan, that you and I encountered each other yesterday morning in just this kind of
Exactly.
way, where we were both in a webinar provided by a company that I've been a customer of for some 7 years, I believe, right? And there you were in this webinar where lots of us were talking in the chat because we've been supporting each other in the Facebook group where this company has built a community. By the way, folks, it's called Bold House, where Bold House has built a community among us, and where we often provide support back and forth to one another.
Exactly. The opportunity for brands to build community where they're not always part of it. They start to get it built, they let their customers talk, and all of a sudden loyalty increases because everybody in the community has the one thing in common of that brand. I've recently done some presentations for the International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners and talk about, specific, but every organization that's part of this group lives in the Microsoft ecosystem. Microsoft doesn't sponsor this community. Microsoft does support this community with some financial gain and some free services. But the IAMCP members, and doesn't that just roll right off the tongue? The
Sure does.
IAMCP members get the value of membership in this community from the other members, not from the mothership.
Great. And so we're using this as an example, not how do you brand, right? IAMCP, no. Which, as you said, right, really rolls off the tongue, and I'm sure I'm going to remember that 10 seconds from now. Rather, we're talking here about creating that community. I love it. So I'll introduce myself, folks. You may know me already. I'm Aaron Schmookler, CEO, co-founder, and company culture engineer at the S-Works, where we work with you to engineer the kind of culture where trust is elevated and people and profits both rise. I'm excited to be here today. And my first suggestion for you today is to identify what is your ideal customer culture. In other words, what are the kind of interactions that you are having with your favorite customers? Who are your favorite customers, and what is it about them? So that you're identifying what is the culture that creates that sense of favorite, and then who are your customers who fit that, and who are your customers who don't fit that, and in particular, as you're identifying who doesn't fit into your favorite, then be prepared to maybe purposefully, and certainly at least by kind of advance acceptance, be ready to jettison the customers who don't fit into this ideal customer culture world. What are your thoughts about that, Bryan?
You're onto something there. The opportunity to really figure out inside of your organization who your best customers are is an opportunity you shouldn't waste. I think there's a step that can be taken between creating your ideal persona for a customer and jettisoning the ones who don't fit as you build culture inside of your organization, but also among your customer base. There's a way to have your salespeople, your customer support or customer success folks, your onboarding teams or your consulting teams, if that's the kind of business you're in, work with existing customers to give them the clue of here's how to work with us best. Our best clients, or the clients who get the highest ROI working with us, do so by, and you start to script for your customers. You get it. It looks like you're doing them a favor by telling them how to get the most out of what you offer. So if you can create your ideal, you can start to move others toward that ideal.
And if you are building this kind of culture that really works for you, that creates these kinds of favorite customer experiences for you, I guarantee you will start to serve those customers better and really create more magnetism, because your employees will be happier in their dealings with these customers. They'll be serving these customers better. And so, because I don't want to too strongly emphasize the idea that you might jettison customers, so much as you work to really be in service of your favorite customers to the degree to which you want to be and they want you to be, so that you have an incredible magnetism for them.
And those are the things that you can do that not only retain your customers, helping you get more direct revenue from them, but they're the ones that start leading your customers to help you bring in indirect revenue through their referrals, through their acting as a reference for you, and even helping you build your brand and give you good counsel. And just a preview of coming attractions, I'll have more to say on identifying your best customers when we get to my third tip. So these things tie in nicely.
Last thing I'll say about this, and then we'll come to you, Bryan, for your second suggestion, is that as well as helping you to retain your best customers, this practice of really identifying what is your favorite customer culture, it'll also help you retain your top talent, which is going to have a virtuous cycle for retaining those top customers as well. All right, Bryan.
100%. One last comment on that. I'm brought back to a book I read a few years ago that I keep returning to because it's just such a great connection of employee culture and internal culture to external culture and the way your customers see you. David Maister's Practice What You Preach, published somewhere in the late 1990s or early 2000s, looked at, in the financial services industry, I believe it was, a couple of hundred outlets of a particular financial services firm, and discovered that there was a, not surprisingly, high causation between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction and profitability. If you've got your employees happy, it just goes out into the world and it has the ability to return to you in the customer relationships that you've got.
Love that. Before we go to you for your second suggestion, Kylan, one of our viewers, asked if there was going to be a recording of this because he'd already like to share it with others on his team. Please pardon me if I'm mispronouncing your name, Kylan. Absolutely, there will be a recording. You can find it on YouTube, and you can find it on right here, wherever you are on LinkedIn as well. When we're through, it'll be there for posterity. Bryan, What is your second suggestion for the good folks at home?
Second suggestion: to keep your customers and keep your customers happy and keep learning from your customers, ask questions. Lots and lots of questions. Start with the simple stuff. After different transactions or at key points on the calendar through the year, do the Net Promoter Score question. How likely are you to refer our services or to recommend us to friends and colleagues? But your sales team, your customer support or customer success teams, anybody touching the customer on a regular basis has the opportunity to informally ping on what can we be doing to help you more? Where does the relationship go from here? When you've got them happy is the time to ask them how to be even more valuable to them. And then you start just going up the ladder with focus groups, or having, if you're doing trade shows, having a question that everybody who comes to your booth gets asked, so you can start getting a consistent level of feedback on certain issues. And then at the top of, especially in B2B organizations, customer advisory councils or customer advisory boards, which I love helping organizations put together. Asking questions on an ongoing basis and increasingly getting multiple questions asked of the same customers who prove to you that they are eager to help you grow and build your brand. Keep it going in every form possible.
So, Bryan, I'm sure that, like me, you have been a customer yourself.
Oh, yes.
And I'll tell you, as a customer, there have been times when the vendor, the company that I'm doing business with, has asked me questions and left me with the experience, with the thought, and sometimes with my saying out loud, why did you even bother asking me? So what would you say about preventing your customer from asking that question back? Why did you even bother asking me this?
Yeah, no, you you took it to the logical next step, which I love. It's the corollary to ask questions is show your customer you're listening. That's not only the active listening skills that each of us as individuals in business tend to get drilled on, but it's returning to the customer to say, we heard what you said about X, and here's what we're doing about it. You may notice we've introduced a new product set, or we have increased our service coverage, or we have a new process for onboarding with our SaaS solution. I had the experience of working with the former VP of sales for the website The Knot, Knot, a website for people planning weddings. When he was VP of sales there, he used to put an hour onto the calendar of every sales rep in his organization and said, this is, if you haven't already this month, given me some feedback on what you're hearing, here's your time to do it. And with each suggestion that he received for, we could try this, or we could do that, or here's what I'm seeing, he would take the time to respond in a mass way and let folks know, I heard this, we're going to try a pilot in this office. I heard this is important enough, we're going to roll something out company-wide. I heard this, it feels like it's a corner case, so let's work directly with the client. But let your customer, whether it's an internal or external customer, know that you've heard them by telling them what you've done with their counsel.
And I would say, and let me know, Bryan, what you think. That in some ways that we can connect this, what we're talking about right now, back to the idea that you want to identify the customer culture that you're trying to build. Because sometimes you're going to say, I've heard your answer to my question, and we're not going to do that for you. And we're not going to do that for anybody. And if that means that we don't do business, then that's okay. And I think it was Southwest Airlines, the CEO got a complaint email from one of the customers who brought them the most revenue, and investigated the complaint, found that it was not in fact the fault of the employee that had prompted the outrage. And his reply email said essentially, thank you so much for your years of service with us. We'll miss you.
I love that. That was probably Herb Kelleher back in the day. What a giant in the industry. The other one I think of is the interview that was done by Jim Sinegal of Costco before he passed away, when he was asked, what are we going to think when the price of a hot dog and a soda goes above $1.50? The because that was his big commitment. He wanted to, and his answer was, "It's going to mean I'm 6 feet under." There's just some things that they don't fit your business model. They'd be too expensive. The other opportunity that gives us, of course, is not just to say, "See you later. Thanks for the years of business. We'll miss you." And I'm suspecting that there was more to that story than just gets published in the press. But the idea that you can go back and say, that's off brand for us. That's not
Yes.
something we're looking at. But what's the question behind your question?
Mm.
What are you looking for that would make it easier? Because maybe there's a partnership we should be forming. Maybe there's some skill transfer we should be considering. There's a bunch of ways to let your customer know that you want them to be part of the solution and you want your conversation to be an ongoing dialogue, not a series of pulses that aren't connected.
Love it.
What's your number 2?
My number 2. All right. My second suggestion for the folks at home, again, is a culture question. Define the boundaries of your culture of agility. And notice that I'm saying define the boundaries of your culture of agility. That presupposes that you must have a culture of agility. It not only all the time, especially in a recession, you're going to need to be agile. You're going to need to be able to be responsive to the needs of the market, to the needs of your customer, to the needs of your employees. And instead of asking yourself, what is negotiable, and starting to pull out, okay, what are the things that we might be willing to change? Take everything off the table of non-negotiability and deliberately put back what is negotiable. Are we willing to negotiate on price? Yes or no? Okay, we're presupposing a willingness. Are we willing to negotiate on terms? Are we willing to negotiate what services we provide, or are we willing to start providing services that we didn't provide before? Are we willing to start taking things out that were important to us that now we're willing to flex on? So again, define the boundaries of your culture of agility, and make as much as is possible to serve your mission, to serve your why, to serve your customers. Make everything possible negotiable. Those are my thoughts.
That's beautiful. I love that you got to the word mission there, because once you know your mission, you can interpret every request made of you by a customer or by your employees or partners through the lens of, is it going to help us achieve our mission? So there's your first boundary to figure out. The knowledge of what you can give on, and where in the organization you empower the right to negotiate on something, absolutely critical. And yes, if you are approaching any customer or every customer with the sort of willing hands and open heart to say, I want to build the business that serves you well. And by the way, you've been a customer of lots of folks and you are a provider to lots of folks. You understand that there's certain just natural restrictions to my business model. Let's find the right solution that helps us both. The best customers, of course, are the ones that are going to play with you and understand that a partnership is better than a vendor relationship.
And I love the question, and it can help us get there. I love the question, what would it take for this to work? Right? So for example, I had a client recently who asked me for a price break. Price breaks are not a thing that we do. And they were very passionate about their need to work with us. And they were also, they just said, this is the boundary for us because of cash flow. And I had the intuition that this was going to be somehow a good move. And so I asked myself, okay, what would it take? And uh, one of the great challenges in my business is to get good photo, good video of things that we're doing, because we have NDAs, and a lot of what we're doing is simply private. And said, all right, here's what it would take in order to meet that price that you are asking for. What would make that work for us is to have the ability to bring in a photographer and to bring in a videographer. It is worth money to us to do that. So essentially, you can think of this as paying us for the privilege of bringing in a photographer and bringing in a videographer. And that's how we made it work.
I love it. No, absolutely, absolutely brilliant. That, and now you've got a client that may be a client for a long time. So breaking the seal, if you will, on that client relationship, now it opens up years worth of delivering value in the form of your services to them, but also receiving value, not only in the form of their payment to you, but in everything else they can do. Referrals, references, helping you build brand, giving you good counsel. And you've opened up whatever the opposite of Pandora's box is. You've opened up an opportunity to keep earning over time, both intellectually and financially.
And the way it occurs for me anyway, and I hope that people will agree that this keeps me in integrity, that I get to say, yes, the principle remains. We don't negotiate on price. I simply have found an opportunity to have you pay us as well. Right. And that we are paying for this, to have us pay you. We are paying for the privilege of coming in and shooting video and shooting photos, which will be of value to us. And so we have still not negotiated on price.
Love it.
All right. Bryan, I think that brings us to number 3. What is your third suggestion? Tell the folks what they've won.
If you are going to unlock customer retention in a recession or not, you need to measure the right things. That starts with the direct revenue that you're receiving from your customers so that you can figure out how to increase that. I look at the customer lifetime value equation. What's an average sale for a particular customer or a class of customers? How many times in a given time period, usually a year, do they make that purchase and spend that money? And then the real kicker, for how long, how many of those time periods, again, usually years, do you get to keep that customer? And looking at ways to increase average sale size, frequency of sale, and the time that you're able to keep that customer. You impact any one of those 3 and you impact the final product. You impact all of those 3 and you've really got something going. And then back to your first point, if you are measuring the right things and figuring out who your best customers are, if you've got a customer who spends $100,000 with you every single year, and it's a transactional relationship, and you've got another customer who's spending a third of that with you, but has brought 2 or 3 new customers to your door, how do you compare those values? So I like to work with organizations to help them look at different quartiles or quintiles of their customer base, or different product sets within their customer base or geographic regions, and figure out where are my referrals coming from and valuing those things. That's what I mean when I say measure the right things. So figure out who are the ones you want to keep and don't make it just purely based on revenue.
I love that, right? Again, we're kind of looking at where are the sources of value in your customers, and it's not just in the dollars that they spend with you, right? The customers who will sing your praises from the rooftops, who will tell everybody, and their brother about what you do and how you've helped them. you know, when it comes to the bottom line, it almost might have made sense for you to do the work for free. So, not that I'm suggesting that. So I think that this measure the right things is so, I mean, it's such a simple idea. And then to me, I think the question of how to identify the right things and then how to measure them, that's a completely new and bigger, potentially harder question.
Yes. And then there's some things, the things we've been talking about, helping your customers who help you build your brand, your customers who will give you good advice through their participation in focus groups or executive engagement programs or customer advisories. Those are things that are really hard to put a financial measure on, but there is some way of giving that some sort of accounting. The
Mm.
one that most companies miss that is easier to look at is this one of where's the indirect revenue coming from? How many times has this customer helped me close a deal by acting as a reference? How many times have they brought a referral to my door, knowing that referrals are easier to close, faster to close, cheaper to close, tend to spend more, tend to stay around longer as a customer? Those are absolutely invaluable. And if you don't have a CRM system, or at least an informal system that allows you to say, company X brought us companies A, B, C, and D,
Right.
and all of that somehow accrues to company X, at least for some period of time, you are potentially missing out on something that's right in front of your nose.
So here's one of the things that matter. Speaking of measure the things that matter, that I think gets too often overlooked, and even when it isn't overlooked, it can be very hard to measure because our customers more often than not simply vote with their feet, right? Why did people leave? Why did our customer leave? And I'm thinking of the phone call that I received years ago from a company in Seattle. The CEO called and said, "I just lost our biggest customer, AWS, Amazon Web Services, just left." And what they said on their way out the door was kind of a punch in the gut to him. And what an incredible gift AWS gave him, that they told him why they were leaving. They said, "We're leaving because you are a collection of individuals, not a team.
Mm,
And that puts us at risk. And so we are leaving to mitigate our risk because you don't operate cohesively as a team." Um, what a gift, because it offers him the opportunity to retain the rest of his customers
yes.
by not putting them at risk in the same way.
And if you're running that business, maybe you use that to rally your troops, get everybody focused on that goal,
Mm.
and then set a future date for returning to AWS and saying, we took your feedback to heart. And here's where giving people the courtesy of telling them what you've done with their feedback comes in. We heard you. We did something about it. And now I'd appreciate the opportunity to vie for your business again. And sometimes, customers leave for all sorts of reasons. After departure debriefs are absolutely critical, because if they don't give you the gift of telling you on their way out the door why they're leaving, it's incumbent upon smart business owners and leaders to reach out and say, it seems like the pace we've been keeping has fallen off or has fallen to nothing. Just want to check in with you.
Mhm. Yeah.
What will you learn? You don't know until you ask.
Yeah. And I make a regular, when we don't make a sale, I try to make a regular, if not 100% practice of saying, "Thank you so much for the opportunity. Always looking to improve things over here. Would you be so kind as to share with me what happened that we didn't win this business, or what happened that we lost this business from you?"
And the only answer that seems unacceptable to that question is, wow, your price was just too high. Because that, to me at least, in our professional services world, that means you didn't do nearly a good enough job describing the value you were going to deliver and the potential return on that investment.
Or conceivably didn't do a good enough job connecting for them what they are struggling with, right? And really helping them to see, because I know some of the vendors that I've worked with that have been the most valuable to me have been the ones who've said, you're neglecting to even notice this pile of kerosene soaked rags in the corner. Right. And let me tell you about spontaneous combustion. Or the folks who've said, you're wondering why your vehicle is making that noise as you go down the highway. Maybe you don't know. I'm familiar with that noise. That's the sound of a flat tire. Right. So and those are the incredibly valuable people. It's the ones who help us see what we aren't seeing that are incredibly valuable. All right. My third suggestion about how to unlock customer attention, even in a recession, is to train the people on your team in emotional intelligence and create a culture of empathy. There is nothing more magnetic than real empathy, like real empathy. And I'm emphasizing this word real because maybe Bryan, you've had experiences like this one where I used to call my cell phone provider if I was having trouble with my cell phone. I would call them and I'd say, all right, here's the problem that I'm having. And I would just say, here is the problem that I'm having. And I describe the problem. And they were clearly scripted to respond because it happened every single time verbatim. They would say, I'm so sorry for your frustration. And I was tempted every single time to say, well, I wasn't frustrated. I was only having a problem until you told me how I'm feeling. Right. And so to give people training in honest to goodness emotional intelligence, which, by the way, is absolutely learnable, to train people in what does empathy really look like? What are the algorithms? It can be a stepwise function. You can train people what are the steps to follow to express empathy. You can't script it.
My mind is rat holing on the different industries that are just so bad at this. And yes, it's the folks who do cell phones. It's the folks who sell cable or satellite television services. It's
so
the
many of the
global
airlines.
banks. Yeah.
There are exceptions to that one.
There are. I have found fewer exceptions in the phones, television, and banking categories until you get down to regional banks and such. But and then there's the folks who are good at it. One of the technology companies I worked with recently training all of their customer support reps, as opposed to customer success, customer support, very specific, break, fix. Something's gone wrong, or I don't know how to do something. I need to figure it out. They had done a nice job of hiring people who really knew IT and really knew cybersecurity. There were cybersecurity.
That's a good start.
And it was easy for those folks to feel the empathy. It was a little harder for them to express it, and that's what we worked on. And the twin to that empathy was compassion. And empathy looks like, I know what you're going through. And compassion we defined as, and I'm here with you to the end to make sure it gets fixed.
I love that you're making a distinction between empathy and compassion. I think it's Kim Scott at Radical Candor talks about ruinous empathy, right? The idea that if all I have for you is empathy in your time of complaint, then we're both just going to sink into a hole together and cry on each other's shoulders.
Yeah.
And your definition of compassion in some ways is very similar to ours when we're training a team to have compassion. It's, I feel you, right? I understand and can relate to what you are feeling. and I am profoundly committed to our shared purpose.
Yeah,
So
and now we're
we are
back to
going somewhere.
the word you used earlier, mission, right? I understand where and how my services are critical to your mission, whether that mission is manufacturing something or just making your niece happy with the book that you've got for her, whatever it is. You've got a mission. I understand that right now I look like the one preventing you, or my organization looks like the one preventing you from fulfilling it. I'm here. Let's get it fixed, because that's our not just implicit but explicit agreement as
Right.
person who is spending and person who is delivering based on the spend. So let's get it right. And that the stakes get higher as you get into more and more dollars and more business to business, where now I know you've got customers and clients who are reliant upon you. And if I'm the person keeping you from, or the organization keeping you from fulfilling your mission so that your customers can fulfill theirs, guess what? We've now got a multi-stage, multi-layer problem.
Well, we've got a question coming in before we get to your third suggestion.
Yeah.
Brent is asking about how to land and expand in a customer account. Naturally, this tends to happen once trust is established and value is being delivered. Curious how you'd approach it if it isn't happening naturally. Thoughts for Brent?
Yeah, I've got a few, and there's Brent, I'd love at some point to know more about the business you're running and what it is you've got to offer beyond what a particular customer buys. But the opportunity to take a leader in the organization, the person who is the business decision maker, who says, yes, let's go cut a check to Brent's organization, and take advantage of the fact that you now have, by this point, as you point out, built some trust, and say, I want to tell you more about what we do. I see it's back to Aaron's car example, or gasoline soaked rags example. I see that there's more we might be able to help you with. If you're open to that, I just want you to know what we do. And I want to start by asking you, what else could we be doing for you? We've got a good relationship. How do we make ourselves, how do we help you fulfill your mission even better than we are today? And that gets to line extensions or ancillary services or maintenance beyond the original sale. My kid is a landscape designer, landscape architect, and his firm does designs and then installs and also maintenance. And you get one shot, maybe a few, if you've got a front yard, side yard, backyard, at doing a design and then the install. And as soon as you begin to talk with a homeowner or a commercial property about what about monthly maintenance and what about making a burden less on you and making sure you've got this beautiful space, suddenly you've got the maintenance sale. That's just one example.
From a culture perspective, Brent, and I love this question. I'm so glad you asked it. Here's a moment for me to not just have empathy, but to have compassion. And right, the this is going to hurt as part of the compassion. I would suggest, Brent, that you never say land and expand again, because and here's the reason. It's got everything to do with you. It's all about you. What do I want to do? I want to land and expand. That is not customer centric, and it is not service. It is, I want everything that I can get from you, the sales account. And it's not a big pivot that you need to make in order to be positioned to be more useful to your client. So here are a couple of thoughts about that. One, measure the things that matter that you can affect. So, at the Yes Works, what we're doing is we're helping teams to become more communicative, more cohesive. We're improving communication, collaboration, and leadership so that people and profits can rise. So we're measuring team dynamics. And so after an initial measurement, we can say, all right, what's the low-hanging fruit, or what's been most impactful here? Let's address that. And so that is our first engagement, is addressing that low-hanging fruit or addressing that biggest impact. And then we can measure it again. And even that second measurement is in service to the client, so that they understand what are the problems that remain, what has been our ROI on this engagement. We are serving the client. It also happens to help us show, okay, what's next? And then we get to ask, would you like our help with that? So that's one thought that I have there. And then the other thought that I have there around the, and it dovetails with what Bryan was saying, is to say, I'm so glad that you have found that you feel that you can trust us and entrust us with your company, with your whatever. And I know how hard it is to find vendors that you can trust. So in service of the idea that you don't want to spend that time and effort to go gamble again on a new vendor, what do you think about spending 30, 40 minutes with me so that I can tell you all of the ways that we are helping our clients, so that you know not only what have we done for you, but what could we do for you, we who are already in your circle of trust, that you might find valuable in the future. And it may feel like, and if you use it incorrectly, it can be a simply semantic difference. And so you're going to get the greatest impact from this if you're not thinking, how do I land and expand, but how do I really just provide the greatest support that I can. I've been
I love that, Aaron. That's a great answer. I threw around words like bring you more value or help you with your mission. I think you put a really nice, suggested talk track to how to make that happen. It has to do, Brent, with asking the genuine, honest question of someone you've built a relationship with, where you have established trust, as you wrote in your question. How do we make this an even more valuable partnership? Love it, Aaron. Great answer.
Yeah. Again, the tactics, the talk track, that's important. The where are you coming from? Critical, because we can smell it. As Josh Braun says, we can smell your commission breath.
And Brent has just thrown in, that's brilliant. The language we use to talk about our approach to customers will either limit or enable the relationship.
Love
Precisely.
It. All right.
Someone's been listening.
Yes, indeed. All right, Bryan, we are about to hear from you, your fourth and final suggestion about how people can unlock customer retention even in a recession. Before we hear your fourth suggestion, how and why can the good folks at home get a hold of you?
You see my name there right below my smiling face, Bryan with a Y, at bryanrutberg.com. Gets you to my Bryan Rutberg speaking email address. I'd love to talk with you about the speaking and consulting that I do. And if your organization is looking for communications training, there's 3C communications training. But get me at bryanrutberg.com, because that's the easy one to remember. And find me on LinkedIn.
All right. Thanks for that, Bryan. And so that brings us to your fourth and final suggestion for the folks about our topic of the day.
This is my favorite one. It can have magnitude that extends much more deeply than the time it takes to do it. When I put my ebook out, this was tip number 10 of 10 tips. Write thank you notes. Gratitude is absolutely key, and the best way I have found to demonstrate gratitude that sticks with someone long after they've forgotten about the gee, thanks email, they will keep your handwritten card on their desk or on a credenza or something like that. I flip out when someone I've done business with sends me a handwritten card that does a nice job of not just saying thank you, but expressing why they are grateful and
Yes,
what it could mean
specificity.
for us going forward. And I don't know, my parents did a good job with me back when I was a kid, getting presents from grandma and grandpa or going through my bar mitzvah days. I know how to write a good thank you note, and it's one of the things I love to help others do.
And what you said about people keeping them is so true. Years later, I've gone into someone's office to whom I've written a simple thank you note, and it's tacked up on their bulletin board. And a
Yeah.
simple, like I'm thinking of one right now, is just on a really kind of nothing bit of stationery. I've given up the nothing bits of stationery for the most part. I now send people cards that many of which look kind of like this
Mhm.
on the outside, and then you open it up,
Oh
and oh
my.
my goodness, right?
That is gorgeous,
Isn't
Aaron.
this incredible? So, by the way, Love Pop Cards is not a sponsor. This is not a paid endorsement. It is, however, a strong endorsement because years and years later, this is on people's bookshelves. This is on people's windowsills. This is on people's desks because it's a beautiful little bit of sculpture. Love
Yeah.
Pop.
No,
Um,
I've got my own form that I send. It is not anything as nice as that, but it's something I printed up that has my logo and tagline, and so they know who it's coming from. This is something I got from a client within the last couple of weeks. It came along with a large photograph of a wall inside of the client's environment where they had taken the messaging framework work that we had done together and their outward expression to their visitors of their value and what they do in the community was taken directly from the work that we had done. This is the Seattle Aquarium. And, simple. Dear Bryan, words matter. Thank you for helping the aquarium find theirs. And then signed by the client team. This means more. I was happy to cash their checks. Do not get me wrong. But this and the painting that still needs to be, or the printout that still needs to be hung on my wall are going to stay with me forever, long after the dollars have been spent on everything else.
And so part of what I'm taking from this and what I imagine, you folks at home can take from this as well. It's not, hey, thanks for your business. I wrote a text recently, and it will need to be followed up in writing. I wrote a text to a client recently, the CEO of a company, who I felt expressed real vulnerability in front of his team in a workshop that we did with them. I didn't write, hey, thanks for your business. I wrote, hey, thank you so much for being vulnerable with your team during our workshop, because A, it's going to help you get where you're going. Like, I watched the people around the room respond to your vulnerability. B, it really makes my work rewarding when people choose to be vulnerable like that. So it's not thank you for your business, although that's got its value as well. Can you go a level or two deeper than that? Thank them in some way for who they are, not what they've
Mhm.
done that is valuable to you directly.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Beautiful.
All right. So before I get to my fourth suggestion for the folks, I'll let you know how and why you might want to get a hold of me. Again, I'm Aaron Schmookler, CEO, co-founder, trainer, company culture engineer at the Yes Works. And my third suggestion was train people in emotional intelligence and build a culture of empathy. If that's something that you want to do, if you want to build the kind of environment where people and profits both rise and have fulfillment together, then that's a great opportunity to reach out to me. I'm the only Aaron Schmookler on LinkedIn, so I'm easy to find. You can also find us at theyesworks.com. My final suggestion for you about how to retain customers, even in a retention, is to set for yourself and your company a culture of authority. Empower your front lines. It is a special kind of torture to hire people to deliver excellent customer service and then shackle them so that they can't serve the customer, they can't do what they might want to for the customer. I remember years ago, head of an organization brought us in and said, one of our core values here is go above and beyond. And every time I ask an employee in some way to go above and beyond, hey, it would be really help us out if you would stay late. It would really help us out if you could work over the weekend this time. It wasn't a frequent thing. It's really rare that I ask for this, and I never get people enthusiastically saying yes. And so one of the things that we discovered in our investigation of why is it that in a company that touts go above and beyond as a core value, why is it that employees aren't wanting to go above and beyond for the company? And what we found was that the employees would often say they had to ask for permission to go above and beyond for the customer. They had to ask for permission in any way to go above and beyond what was the written letter of here's what we're doing for you. They needed permission. And when they asked for permission, it was more often than not denied. And so it's a special kind of torture to ask people to go above and beyond and then prohibit them from going above and beyond. It's a special kind of torture to ask people to satisfy your customers and then handcuff them so they can't satisfy your customers. So set a culture of authority, give people permission to do more than what is strictly contractually obligated, and see what kinds of returns that kind of permission can get you.
I love it, and thanks for raising that. Earlier in today's conversation, we talked about giving your people the ability to make a difference and pushing authority down. So now we're just codifying that. I think the classic story here, the classic example is, I'm going to get the luxury brand. Maybe I'll get it right. I think it's within the Ritz-Carlton and probably inside of other high-end hospitality properties. Everybody who works for the organization is given the opportunity to spend a certain amount of money as needed without any questions being asked in order to make the life of a guest, make the life of a customer or client easier. I have a good friend who is a television writer and producer who had been spending some time on location in New York working on a shoot that her company was doing, and they had the executives staying at the Ritz-Carlton. Now, it turns out that at one point early in her career, she had done desk work at a Ritz-Carlton inside of in the Ritz-Carlton chain, not in the New York building. But somehow it came out through a conversation with a doorman or a front desk person that, oh yeah, I used to work at a Ritz-Carlton back when I was a kid in college. And she found later that day flowers in her room. Welcome back. It's always good to have an alumni continue to visit with us, and we hope to do anything to make your stay great. The ability of someone to say, I'm going to put flowers in that room. Here I am years later telling this story of how this high-end TV writer and producer felt because of an offhand comment that once she used to work at a Ritz-Carlton.
Right. And so, right, not only did that deliver an excellent experience to this customer, so right, that gets us into the customer retention. It also delivered, I'm sure, a great experience for the employee who had the permission to just simply make that decision.
How good do you feel that you did something nice for someone?
Right. And I can hear you out there, with the objection that what if they extend further than I wish that they would have? What if they give something that was not appropriate to give? Well, let me ease your concerns. It's absolutely going to happen. That is going to happen. And it's not going to break the bank. When it happens, it's going to be marginal. It's not going to be something huge. And you get to use that as an opportunity to say, thank you so much for going above and beyond for this customer. In the future, here's why I'd like for you to make a different decision in a circumstance like that, and call it tuition.
Love it.
All right. I could go on and on and on about just this little piece, and we've already been here for a full hour.
Great.
Bryan, I just want to say thank you, because as always, this conversation with you has been really fun.
I was just reflecting, Aaron, on how frequently we start a conversation thinking we'll get out of it quickly, and we end up spending an hour.
Yeah.
You're a delight to play with. I love
Oh,
your
come on.
business. I love your personality.
I love you, and that's the truth. And by the way, folks, Bryan has done more than just this with me. In a peer group that I lead of other CEOs, Bryan has brought tremendous value, and just he's really very much about bringing love to and from the customer. And so I encourage you to reach out to Bryan if you think there's any chance that he could help you, boost or maintain your revenues, whether we've got a recession coming or not.
Thank you so much. What a delight to get to spend this time with you. And I appreciate the nice things, and everything is returned 100-fold.
Roshan and anybody else who may be thinking that, as Roshan is thinking their gratitude in our direction without saying so, thank you for being with us. It's really been our pleasure.
Cheers all. Have a great week and happy holidays.
Bye all.